All right, y'all, what's going on? Good morning. Happy Monday morning. We're here for the Monday morning live. What's going on, y'all? How we doing? Put a one in the chat if y'all can hear me clearly. Put a one in the chat if y'all can hear me clearly. Let me see if I need to make any kind of adjustments on my volume here. All right, I think we good. That's right. Miss Cali Girl, what's going on? Good to see you in here. Night Fox. Virginia, what's going on? Good to see you in here. Big Mama in here. We got my Big Little Mama. Little Big Mama. All right, got you in here. What's going on? Good morning. Good to see you in here. Miss Kim. Raj, what's going on? Good evening. All right. That's right. Yeah, Night Fox. I turned the music up a little bit for you so you could rock out a little bit. You know what I mean? Before we get started. So basically, y'all know I like to talk about the edge cases sometimes when it comes to certain health issues, right? And in this case, this morning, we are going to do our best to cover the bases of a big part of metabolic health. This is related to kidney health. This is related to blood pressure, diabetes, right? Blood sugar control. This is related to muscle building, all of that, right? Hormonal balance, everything. We're talking about excessively high triglycerides and cholesterol. This is really important. And so I want to break down and dive into the mechanics of how this works and how to fix these issues. All right. So how to lower cholesterol and triglycerides, specifically how to lower triglycerides and cholesterol, right? So basically if you got them triglycerides up in the several hundreds of points, maybe even 1,000, I've seen some pretty high numbers. It's fairly rare to see numbers typically like over 400, but I've seen like 800 and even over 1,000. It's very rare, but it could be the case, right? So getting those triglycerides down under 100, right? I think that's a good goal, getting it somewhere around 80 or something like this. And then as far as cholesterol is concerned, as far as high cholesterol is concerned, if you have, let's say, high LDL cholesterol is like, 120, 140, 170, 200, 300, something like this. And then that HDL cholesterol is like 40s, 20s, 30s, something like this. That's a massive imbalance in cholesterol that is an indication of chronic inflammation, right? So if you have low HDL and high LDL, this is often a sign of a congested liver, a lot of inflammation going on in the liver, right? And these are things that you could see typically on a blood test when you get a full panel. Right? So wanting to get that LDL cholesterol down, I think having like a total of like around 120 to maybe even 140 total cholesterol, right? HDL around 60, LDL around 60, maybe 70, something like this. And these numbers are related to a lot of different things. And then you have elevated, let's say, AST and ALT, right? These are your liver enzymes, right? Your AST and ALT, these liver enzymes are transport mechanisms to basically transport things out of the liver, right? This is a way that your body manages toxin buildup or acidicness in your liver, right? So if you have some inflammation going on in the liver, that'll jack up your liver enzymes, right? Typically, the things that'll really drive this up will be certain types of medications. It'll be excess saturated fat accumulation from high levels of fat in the diet. This could be a result of a low fiber diet and excess protein consumption. And then, of course, there's alcohol consumption and smoking, right? These things will really drive that up. Now, this is where fiber really comes into play, right? And this is one of those things I got to say up front, because you hear this thing with fiber is completely unnecessary in a diet, right? Your body doesn't use fiber for energy. Fiber is not necessary to a diet. You hear a lot of people who advocate for, let's say, a carnivore diet will say this. And when somebody says to me, well, fiber is not necessary, I'm like, you don't know what fiber does. You actually don't know what fiber does. So you don't understand the importance of it, right? That's what that tells me. Because anybody who is really well informed on nutrition understands it's a ridiculous statement. Carbohydrates are not necessary. Fiber is not necessary. There's a lot of things that's not necessary, right? It's not necessary to make $500,000 a year. It'd be highly beneficial if you did. It's not necessary to have a home or roof over your head. It's not necessary. It's highly beneficial when you do. It's not necessary to have hair on your head. It's not necessary to have eyebrows. It's not necessary to have 10 toes. It's not necessary. It's highly beneficial if you do. I can go on and on and on. Saying that something is not necessary doesn't mean that's not a meaningful statement. There's a lot of things in our life that are highly beneficial that we don't necessarily need, but we keep them because they're highly beneficial to our lives. Fiber is one of those things. Fiber is a dietary detox mechanism. There's different types of fiber. Right? You've got insoluble fiber, and then you've got soluble fiber. Insoluble fiber does not dissolve in water, which means it passes through your body largely intact. Right? And then you have soluble fiber, which does dissolve in water and turns into like a gelatinous substance. Right? It expands and turns into this gelatinous substance, where insoluble fiber doesn't. And typically you need both because both do different things and they also work together to achieve particular results. For example, roughly 70 plus % of all homes in the U.S. Have a toxic mold problem to one degree or another, right? Y'all have heard of black mold. And the big problem with mold is the fact that it turns into, or it releases spores, and the spores go up into the air, and then you can inhale, and often do inhale these spores, and they enter your body. And mold can have a parasitic relationship with your body. It can eat away at the tissues and cells and organs and whatnot in your body and lead to respiratory issues and things like this. You could have and can live with asthma, sleep apnea, things like this, right? And you can have eczema, different skin rashes and things of this, right? You can have psoriasis, things of this nature. And a lot of that can be mold poisoning, right? You can develop certain autoimmune issues because of mold exposure, pulmonary issues, right? Cardiovascular issues because of mold, right? Mycotoxins floating around in your bloodstream. Dietary fiber can help to eliminate mold from your body by binding to it, right? Because fiber binds to things that are excessive in your gut. Okay. And what happens is when that fiber travels through your digestive tract and binds to things, it has this magnetic effect where it can also in turn detoxify your blood. Okay. When you eat, blood flow is directed towards your digestive tract. And it's this two-way street, inflows and outflows. And so toxins can actually come and be extracted out of your bloodstream and binded up by the fiber that is traveling through your gut, and then it comes out in your fecal matter. And this is one way that you can eliminate mycotoxins from your body. Now, of course, if you're living in the mold, this isn't really necessarily a solution because, well, for all the times that you're not eating, you're just accumulating mold in your body when you're inhaling it. I'm just using that as an example, right, of how it can slow down the spread and the damage. If you have excessive levels of estrogen, fiber can bind to it. Okay. Now, since we're on the topic of, let's say, cholesterol, You can have excessive cholesterol, possibly, because you don't get enough fiber in your diet, and you're getting a disproportionate level of protein and fat in your diet. Y'all have heard me talk about the protein problem, right? Typically, the way that you get excessive levels of protein accumulation in your diet is through foods that are higher in dietary fats. Protein is typically in foods that are higher in fats. Foods that are mostly carbohydrate based are typically lower in protein, right? And lower in fat, obviously. So, like, for example, if you have like a diet that's made up of just like whole grains, starchy foods like potatoes, yams, yucca, cassava, fruits, things like this. This is going to be more of a low protein diet, food, high in leafy green vegetables and things. This is going to be more of a low protein diet and higher in carbohydrates as well as fiber. A diet like that is really good for actually driving down excessive cholesterol. If you have high levels of dietary fat and protein in your diet, the fat and the protein are used to make lipoproteins that we call cholesterol. Cholesterol is used to make bile that is needed in order to facilitate the full digestion and breakdown of protein and fat. Right? This is the reason why, like, if you're missing like a gallbladder or you have like a compromised gallbladder, one of the worst things you can do is have excessive levels of fat and protein in your diet. When I say excessive, this is pretty much going to be where your dietary fat intake exceeds generally 1 to 1.2 grams of fat per kilogram of lean mass. All right. And excessive protein is where your dietary protein makes up above 10 to 16%. So like above 16% of your macros, or protein exceeds. Protein is a little bit more loose because it depends on how much of it you use. But generally speaking, the safe amount is anywhere from 1 to 1.4 grams of protein per kilogram of lean mass. 1.6 being like the upper limit. Once you go above 1.6, you start having issues. But that number is relative to how much food you're eating in general. And the reason why is because the fiber content. The more whole foods you eat, the more fiber you get in. And the more fiber you get in, it regulates the excess of protein and fat because it binds to excess protein and fat in the digestive process. So there's the nuance there. If you have issues with excess cholesterol and things like that, you don't want to be drinking protein shakes and stuff like this, right? Because then you're going to get protein that is disproportionate to the amount of fiber in your diet. But in any case, fiber binds to bile acids. Okay? So what happens is as that fiber binds to the bile acids and travels through your digestive tract, that bile comes out in your fecal matter. This is also really important if you have, let's say, GERD, right? If you have issues with acid reflux, right? That increase in dietary fiber can help to bring down excess acid. So in any case, the fiber binds to the bile acids and that can come out of your body through the digestive process and your fecal matter. Cholesterol is then used to make more bile. Rinse and repeat, your body is eliminating the bile acids and then it has to be replaced by expending more cholesterol, converting that cholesterol into more bile acids to replace the bile acids that the fiber bound to and removed from your body through your fecal matter. So this is where you start to balance out your inflows and outflows. So if you have a diet that's lower in fat and protein, where let's say fats is like around 10% to 15% of your macros, and protein is like around 10, maybe 12% of your macros, and the rest is carbohydrates, this is typically going to be a high fiber diet. And that high fiber is going to bind to excess lipids, basically the scientific term for fat, and bind to excess amino acids and proteins and things like this, as well as bile acids, and begin to flush these things out of your body to bring these levels down. And that, in large part, is what corrects the cholesterol levels. Right? So if you have... What? Let's what? Okay. So basically, that's one of the mechanisms. So this is all about fiber. Fiber is really important with that. And I'm like, you know what? Let me explain this because, sometimes you go in the grocery store and you'll see like on certain breakfast cereals, like bran flakes, Cheerios. You see this on Cheerios. Cheerios will like brand themselves being heart healthy, right? Really good for heart health, Cheerios. Why? Because it's high in fiber. Why is it being high in fiber beneficial? Nobody really tells you. Psyllium husk. Why do people take psyllium husks? Because fiber. What's it do? That's why. Binds the bile acids, reduces that. Cholesterol converted more into more bile acids, etc. If you don't have enough fiber in your diet, your body reabsorbs that bile. Also, the salt. So if you have a low level of fiber in your diet, and your diet is high in fat and protein and salt, you get this excessive lipid level, and you get this excessive level of nitrogen and amino acids and whatnot saturating your bloodstream. And then, of course, all of that gets sent to your liver. So you get all of this excess protein and fat sent to your liver. And then what happens is you get this increase in cholesterol as a result. So high levels of mainly saturated fat, but fat in general, will raise your cholesterol level, right? If protein is high, fat's high, fiber is low, this is how you get this issue over time. Inflammation, if you have significant levels of sustained chronic inflammation, this is going to lead to your HDL and your LDL cholesterol being even more disproportionate. All right. High levels of inflammation would reduce magnesium levels and would reduce vitamin D levels. So then you can get a vitamin D deficiency, you can get a magnesium deficiency, you get this disproportionate level of LDL cholesterol and low level of HDL cholesterol. And then you end up getting issues with gout, GERD, nerve damage, right? You can get like sharp pains, numbness, tingling, get edema and all this. Now, typically when people have these low fiber diets that are high in protein and fat, this is like an animal-based diet. And of course, meat don't really taste that good. So you would tend to use more salt in your diet with these things. So low levels of fiber and high levels of salt, the salt gets reabsorbed back into your body along with the bile acids. Now, you need potassium to balance out sodium. Sodium hydrates your cells, potassium hydrates your blood. Right? If you have less fiber in your diet, typically you'll have less potassium in your diet. So if potassium is low disproportionately to sodium, salt, so you have this high level of salt and low potassium and low fiber, this leads to things like edema and neuropathy because you get this excessive sodium reabsorption. It's too much. So you're pooling all this excess water, which leads to the accumulation of fluid in your feet, ankles, lower legs, hands, things like this, right? You can even get swelling in your face and in your neck, right? You can even feel the swelling like around here. It could be in your cheeks and your face and all this type of stuff, right? And what happens is over time, this leads to high blood pressure because your blood pressure increases in order to speed up the rotation and the cycling of these of sending these things that are excessively being built up in your bloodstream. So your body will try to get rid of this excess sodium and lipids and amino acids and whatnot. We'll try to get that out of your bloodstream by increasing the rate at which your blood cycles through your body. So it can filter through your lymphatic system, so it can filter through your kidneys, so it can send more of it to your liver and all your other cells. Right? And then, of course, if your blood is cycling faster, you're taking in more oxygen, right? Your heart rate's raising because your body's trying to dilute all this excess in your bloodstream, because if it doesn't do that, it's going to kill you. So your heart works harder and your vascular system in order to create that pressure to cycle things. If your blood pressure is chronically elevated, the reason why is because you've depleted so much of your body's resources. It's taking way too long for your vascular system to dilate after the constriction. If you have too much sodium saturating your blood, you don't have the level of potassium needed, and you likely don't have the level of vitamin C needed in order for the conversion to happen from citrulline to arginine to nitric oxide. Then the nitric oxide gets released from your endothelial layer of your vascular tissues, increases oxygen saturation in the blood, and dilates your vascular system, relaxing your vascular system so you can have healthy blood pressure. That's what's supposed to happen. But these imbalances in your diet cause the high blood pressure, the excess of sodium accumulation, edema, all this. This is how this works, mechanistically. Right? So basically, this is why it's important to have a whole food, fiber-rich, plant-based diet for an issue like this. It's all related. Cholesterol, blood pressure, edema, neuropathy, water retention, all of this is related to what I just said. Right? So that's the cholesterol issue. So the targets for dietary fat intake, this is a generally speaking thing. This is very general. Because for each individualized person and their diet and lifestyle, the numbers are going to vary a bit. But generally speaking, dietary fats would be anywhere from 1 to 1.2 grams of fat per kilogram of lean mass. So on average for a man, it would be somewhere like around 60 grams of fat per day. And for a woman, it would be like around 45. Right? Protein, in between 10 to 16% of your macros should be proteins. It's somewhere in the middle, right? So what that would look like for a woman is somewhere around 40 grams of protein a day, anywhere from 40 to 60. For a man, it would be anywhere from, like, let's say 60 to 90 or 60 to 80 is generally enough. And I'm saying this based on lean mass, not total body weight, because we don't calculate body fat into this number. Because we're not trying to feed and sustain our body fat, which is the reason why we don't include that in this calculation. That's very important to understand. So you basically take your total body weight on the scale, you divide that by 2.2 to get your weight in kilograms, and then you subtract your body fat percentage. All right? So if your body fat is 30%, you would subtract 30%. If your body fat's 10%, you would subtract 10%. And then carbohydrates is essentially carbohydrates will typically sit between 65 and 80% of your macros. All right. It's important to adhere to the math because that's your way out. So you have to sit down and do the math. If you don't want to sit down and do the math, then you have me do your plan for you. Right? So that's largely how you correct the cholesterol issue. Now we're going to food choices. And food choices, we got our categories of foods, right? We've got fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, grains, legumes. If you're doing more of a raw diet, then this is going to be fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds. Or fruits, leafy greens, nuts, and seeds, I should say. If you're going to solve this issue through more of a raw diet, it's mostly going to be fruits, right? And then the rest is going to be more so your nuts and seeds, leafy greens, and then sprouted legumes, sprouted mung beans, sprouted lentils, and you can even do things like sprouted quinoa, right? Sprouted oats, right? You could do overnight oats, these types of things. And there's different ways to do it, because you can have a high raw fruit-based diet, where it's basically all carbohydrates, all fruits throughout the day, and then the one savory meal at the end of the day, like a big salad, mushrooms, sprouted lentils, hemp seeds, pumpkin seed kernels, leafy green vegetables, cucumber, peppers, onions, this type of thing, right? Avocado would be a lot where you get like at least half your fats for the day. But your best nuts and seeds are going to be the things that are the highest in omega-3 essential fatty acids. So this is going to be chia, hemp, flax, right? Chia seeds, hemp seeds, flax seeds. This is going to be things like pumpkin seed kernels. This is going to be things like almonds, walnuts, right? And sunflower seed kernels. Those are your best. Those are the ideal. That's pretty much going to be where you primarily get your fats from. The reason why that's important is because if you're getting most of your fats and your dietary fats from those omega-3 essential fatty acids, right, those foods, that's going to give you the greatest return, and those typically have the highest dietary fiber concentration. So then you can have more of a high raw diet where it's fruits, and then you've got legumes and leafy green vegetables and maybe some starchy foods, maybe like some kasha or some quinoa or something like that. Not much dietary fats, right? So you may not use avocado in that. Maybe you do avocado once or twice a week, right? So really driving down the dietary fats to correct this issue. Now we move on to triglycerides, because triglycerides basically is what happens when typically you have insulin resistance of the liver and you have an overaccumulation of glycogen storage in the liver. And you have a lot of fat in your liver. And the more fat you have in your liver, that leads to more insulin resistance of the liver. You said, is it true that all nuts in stores aren't raw? Even when a package doesn't say anything? I mean, as far as I know, I mean, if the nuts are raw, it would specify on the package, right? It'll either be roasted or raw typically. It'll be roasted and salted, roasted and unsalted, or raw, right? Those are typically the options you got. Okay, so moving on to triglycerides, right? Triglycerides is usually a result of excessive sugar intake combined with insulin resistance of the liver due to the overaccumulation of fat in the liver, right? So this is a fatty liver disease issue, right? So there's two types of fatty liver disease. You've got fatty liver disease typically that is induced by alcohol consumption, and then you have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, NAFLD for short, right? So if you read scientific papers about this, it'll just be abbreviated to NAFLD, NAFLD, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, right? Is really important because you do have people where I'm a big fan of like a fruitarian style diet. The problem is you may be doing a fruitarian diet and still have elevated triglycerides, and you're like, I don't understand. I've been juicing fruits and eating in fruits, and I've been doing pretty good with that, but my triglycerides are still really high. If that's the case, It is likely because you're significantly overweight and your ability to exercise is significantly diminished. So, like, let's say if you have a lot of hip pain, knee pain, you have a lot of pain in your feet as a result of like gout, right? So you're dealing with a lot of pain, joint pain, swelling in your big toes, right? Things like this. Maybe you have like back issues, lower back issues, a slip disc, herniated disc, or whatever the case is. And so your ability to, to consistently exercise and go out for walks and things like that is limited. So it's very difficult to be able to regulate the glycogen and fat accumulation in your liver. In that case, diet isn't really going to fix that issue. Not unilaterally. It's not enough. If this is your issue, your fasting is going to be your next big bet. This is why I make the distinction between triglycerides and cholesterol, because you can have a diet that fits the guidelines of what I said about the cholesterol, but still have the really elevated triglycerides. Those really elevated triglycerides, even with a whole food diet, typically is because of insulin resistance of the liver. You just got way too much being packed into your liver. But there's a lot of other factors that your diet can't really override. So for example, elevated cortisol, sleep deprivation. Let's say you're dealing with a lot of pain, sharp pain, tingling sensations, numbness, joint pain, right? Injuries, chronic fatigue, heart palpitations, panic attacks, sleep deprivation. Those things will make you insulin resistant over time. Those things will destroy your metabolic health. It'll make you insulin resistant in your liver. It'll make you insulin resistant in your brain. It'll make you insulin resistant in the muscle tissue, all that. Right? Your diet can help to improve your blood sugar numbers. It can, but it may and may not. It really depends on the day and how much oxidative stress and whatnot you're under. This is the caveat here, right? Diet, in a lot of cases, is not enough. So this is where now fasting takes center stage. Fasting could jack up your cortisol levels. Fasting doesn't bring down your cortisol levels. Insulin does. Interestingly enough, right? Cortisol and insulin kind of have like this counter relationship. When insulin goes up, cortisol goes down. It may not always play out like that. That's generally, typically how it does play out. So when you eat carbohydrates, that reduces the cortisol, reduces the chronic inflammation because of all of the antioxidants, minerals, and vitamins in the food that help to bring down the cortisol and the oxidative stress and protect the health of your cells. That's generally speaking what happens. However, sometimes it's not the case if your liver is just too congested. But what fasting does, even though it may not bring down cortisol, but it does bring down chronically elevated insulin. It may take a bit longer depending on how insulin resistant you are. But however, it does give your body a chance to empty out your liver. Your liver should weigh about like 3 pounds or so, right? 1.5 kilograms. The liver is relatively small. Your liver, generally speaking, will hold anywhere from like 100 to 120 grams of glycogen. Glycogen is how your body stores glucose, right? So you eat carbohydrates. The carbohydrates get broken down into glucose or fructose or both, right? Split between the two. And that fructose and glucose then goes to your liver and is stored in your liver as glycogen. Fructose gets converted into glucose in the liver. And then that glucose gets stored as glycogen, right? So basically like 100 grams of glycogen is like 400 calories, basically, right? So you'd have to burn 400 calories of stored glycogen in your liver. Okay. Generally speaking, you empty out your liver overnight. You burn around 500-600 calories in your sleep overnight. So if you sleep anywhere from like 6 to 8 hours, within that 6 to 8 hour period, you typically would have burned 500 to 600 calories in your sleep at night. However, if you're very insulin resistant, and you have a fatty liver, so your liver is heavier than it should be because there's too much fat stored in your liver, this can take much longer. So you may not have fully emptied out your liver by the time you wake up. And even if you have, your liver could still be insulin resistant because of the really elevated cortisol and the fat accumulation in your liver. So cortisol would be high, blood sugar would be high, because cortisol increases the conversion of fat into glucose and then dumps it into your bloodstream, thus spiking your blood sugar. This is known as the dawn effect. Triglycerides is basically your body is taking fat and converting it into glucose, dumping it into your bloodstream. Right? So it's the type. So that type is called triglycerides. So if you are storing too much glycogen in your liver, well, this is going to be the thing. This drives up your triglycerides. So you can fast your way out of it. The cortisol is a steroidal hormone. Okay, it's a stress hormone. So cortisol is actually protective in nature. Your body responds to stressful conditions and prioritizes insulin sensitivity of the brain. Right? This is why cortisol, when it spikes, it wakes you up and really it almost has like an adrenal kind of effect on your brain chemistry. Right? So you could be like really wired. This is why if your cortisol is like really excessively elevated, you wake up like 1 or 4 o'clock in the morning and it's very difficult to get back to sleep because your cortisol level is just spiking way too early. Generally speaking, cortisol is supposed to be mostly elevated in the morning and then comes down mid-afternoon and stabilizes out. And it's at its lowest point at night when you go to sleep. That's what should happen. If you're under chronic stress, however, cortisol can be spiked in the morning and at night, really cutting into your sleep quality. So if you're going to fast, the fasting can be really beneficial for reducing the amount of stored fat and glycogen in your liver, as well as stored fat in your muscle tissue. Right? Because the things that make you insulin resistant and ultimately make you diabetic is because you're storing too much fat in the muscle tissue and too much fat in your liver. And then what happens is over time, you have this increase in visceral fat, which is a layer of fat directly on top of your organs. And then that increases. And so you can get like an insulin resistance issue of the vital organs in your body because of the excess visceral fat. So this leads to just perpetually elevated glucose. It's very difficult to control your blood sugar. Fasting is like the quickest way out. Right? Fasting will cause you to force your body to use more of that stored glycogen and fat that's already in your body. And in the fasting, the longer you do it, it triggers autophagy and apoptosis. Apoptosis is programmed cell death. So old damaged zombie cells, they can just linger in your body, robbing your other cells of their electrons and resources, causing this cascading effect of chronic oxidative stress, which your body responds to with inflammation. Inflammation is the response to oxidative stress. Cortisol is not entirely, but the disproportionately elevated cortisol is an inflammation. It's an inflammatory response. Right? But cortisol will save your life, believe it or not. That's your body trying to keep you alive. So when that gets really elevated, you get these higher levels of blood sugar, and you can even have high blood sugar even during a fast. You can control for cortisol. You don't really want to completely drop your cortisol levels during a fast, but you want to have more of a controlled flow of cortisol. As insulin drops, cortisol is going to be higher, and basically your body's going to be dumping more blood sugar. But if you sustain a fasting plan, let's say for 12 weeks, and let's say you have a fasting window of anywhere from 20 to 24 hours, Right, this is a good window. Typically, when people talk about intermittent fasting, it's a 16-hour eating window, which could be beneficial, but for some people who have really serious numbers, 16 hours may not be enough. You may need to extend it to around 20 or 24 hours, or somewhere in between 20 or 24 hours. So you may want to do like a 4-hour eating window, 20-hour fast, or OMAD, 1 meal a day, right? Interesting thing to know, though, is 1 meal a day may not correct your cholesterol. It may not. It could, but it may not. So it depends. What's your more urgent issue? The triglycerides or the cholesterol? Which one is more disproportionate and problematic? High cholesterol is not necessarily like a negative thing, right? You really shouldn't be alarmed necessarily because your cholesterol is more elevated. But if you have elevated cholesterol and triglycerides and you have vascular damage, well, now that's the substrate for heart attack, right? So if you have high ApoB, high AST, high ALT, high triglycerides, or you have all of these other risk factors, well, now it's a problem. But if you have, like, let's say high cholesterol but low triglycerides and you have no vascular damage, well, that's a bit of a different story. You don't really need to be so alarmed with that. So there are nuances to this. But bringing down the triglycerides is more urgent. That's more urgent, right? Because that's a metabolic issue. So to deal with the stress that you get from the fasting, you may want to implement some herbs for that. So herbs during the fast. So y'all hear me talk about this a lot. Start your days off with things like matcha, ginseng, ginkgo, oolong tea, right? White tea, black tea, things like this in the morning. Particularly, I'm more partial to matcha or any type of green tea. Ginkgo, ginseng, and oolong, because those are very rich in L-theanine, which is really good for healthy brain chemistry, stable mood, and cortisol regulation. And because of the high concentration of antioxidants in these teas, that would drive down cortisol levels. The more antioxidants you get in your diet, and flood your body with, that'll drive down cortisol. Right? Because now your body can rely on the antioxidants that you're taking in and doesn't have to deploy as much cortisol. And then there's other things, right? You got ginger tea, ginger turmeric tea, fennel tea, basil, things like this, right? And these are good for regulating inflammation, digestive health, right? Gut health, hormonal balance, right? Things of this nature. And then towards the end of the day, ashwagandha. Ashwagandha is a big one. Man, ashwagandha is strong. So doing like 1,000 milligrams, basically 1 gram of ashwagandha before bed at night. Or if you do a liquid form, like one milliliter of ashwagandha before bed at night, right? In like a liquid dropper, like 2 hours before bed or so, right? Is really good for reversing sleep deprivation. So you take 12 weeks, you consistently do the ashwagandha before bed at night with your fasting plan and your eating plan. It's a great way to regulate stress management, right? Regulate stress and bring that down so you can get more deep sleep and get more REM sleep, which is where you get a lot of your healing done. That deep sleep is really important. So generally speaking, you should be getting like around an hour and a half of deep sleep and an hour and a half of REM sleep and around 4 to 5 hours of light sleep. And as far as your awake time during the night, you want to keep that to a grand total of like around maybe 20, 30 minutes. At least 45. You don't really want it to be that high. 45 minutes of awake time is kind of high in the middle of the night. But as long as you're getting those sleep cycles, where you're getting you're getting enough deep sleep and REM sleep, that's really important. That's a game changer. That's the way that you heal and get your way out of these issues. All right. Some foods that's up for consideration, especially now we're in the winter season, right? So your soups and stews are going to be a big deal. So there's a few things I want to talk about. Legumes take center stage, especially fasting. If you're fasting, if you're doing a 20-hour fast, if you're doing OMAD, your legumes are a big deal. Your chickpeas, your black beans, your lentils, your mung beans, your cannellini beans, your black eyed peas, your red kidney beans, right? These types of things. Those things I just mentioned, those are on the list. All right. Quinoa, kasha. Kasha is basically toasted buckwheat. So we got quinoa, we've got kasha, we've got oats. Oats are really good for bringing down excess cholesterol because oats are high in soluble fiber and a lot of soluble fiber. So it's really good to give you that binding mechanism, right? To bind up those bile acids, like I mentioned earlier, right? To regulate that. Also flushing out excess triglycerides, right? Really beneficial for that. Detoxifying your body from heavy metals, microplastics, things like that. The oats are really good for that. I don't know why people talk so much crap about oats. Because oats are highly beneficial. Now, some people are like, I get really gassy and bloated if I eat oats. Well, then don't eat oats. You probably have a sensitivity to it. Like for me, when I eat barley, I get crazy gassy and bloated when I eat barley. I can eat rice, I can eat quinoa, I can eat oats, but for some reason, barley, Lord, had me out here feeling pregnant, right? So barley, for some reason, I don't do well with. Right? But yeah, so in the top of my list, we've got the oats, which are oats have a really, really good nutrient profile. People don't understand. Magnesium, zinc, selenium, boron, magnesium, manganese, copper. Oats are really high in iron. I mean, B vitamins, B1, B2. I mean, just really good nutrient profile. Kasha is also a really good one. Kasha is very rich in copper. Right? Buckwheat in general, really good, really high source of copper. Oh man, if you increase the level of copper in your diet, man, that really facilitates healing. Manganese, kasha is really rich in manganese. Good source of zinc. Good source of magnesium. Oats are a bit higher in magnesium and iron though, as opposed to kasha. But you can alternate between the two. However, in my view, I have oats as more like a breakfast food, right? You can do it at night. That's just my preference. But if you're doing OMAD, probably going to default to things like the kasha. You don't really have to worry about the iron that you can get from oats because you would end up getting that iron from the leafy green vegetables and the legumes. So we got kasha, quinoa, wild rice. Rice. Oh, it's got a really good nutrient profile. Longer cooking time, but that wild rice has really good fiber. Oh, it's got a really good abundance of fiber, right? So that's good stuff. So there's those wild rice, quinoa, kasha, and then we've got kamut, which is like an ancient Egyptian wheat. And interesting enough, even if you have a gluten sensitivity, kamut tends to not negatively affect people who have a gluten sensitivity, interestingly enough. Right, so something to note there. Potatoes, sweet potato, yams, yucca, cassava, really good stuff. Good sources of folate, especially the really deeply pigmented potatoes like this, your purples, your deep yellows, your orange sweet potato, right? Particularly the oranges and the purples, really good sources of vitamin A, or beta carotene, I should say, really good sources of folate. Good B vitamin profile, good sources of copper, iron, right? The legumes I mentioned earlier. Peas is another one. And then you've got okra. People sleep on okra. Okra is a really good source of soluble fiber. So okra is a good detox food. So getting that okra in. Okra is a big deal. Artichoke. Good source of prebiotic fiber, improves gut health. Right? Nice balance between soluble and insoluble fiber. Right? That's good stuff. Parsley. Parsley is really good for detoxification of heavy metals, microplastics. Right? Things like that. Environmental contaminants. Parsley is really good for that. Basil. Right? So you can get your raw herbs. Right? Oregano. Thyme. Dill. Get your herbs in there. Leeks. Red onion. Green onion. Peppers. Peppers, definitely get your peppers in because those are good sources of vitamin C. Peppers are a really good source of vitamin C. Cucumber, squash. Squash is a really big one. And then we've got cabbage. Like some nice thick green leafy cabbage. Bok choy is up there on the list for me. Oh man, Chinese cabbage, that bok choy, that's one of my favorites. Red cabbage, Chinese cabbage, collard greens, kale, arugula, watercress. So these are some foods definitely to put on the list to fix these issues. All right. So I'll leave it there. I don't want to overload y'all up too much. But those are some of the things, those are some of your foods right there to put on your shopping list and get into, right? Get into your soups and stews. Tighten up that eating window. Let's get up with y'all in these comments here. I'm tired of being fat. I want to go raw vegan, but I don't know how to make my diet. Can you tell me what I can do? Book a call with me. Hit the link in the description of this video. Book a call with me, right? By the way, like the stream. If you like the stream, hit that like button. If you haven't subbed to the channel already, definitely subscribe to the channel. All right. So you definitely hit the link in the description of this video. You can book a call with me or join the community. Okay. It's a free tier and a paid tier. Free tier gets the live stream replays. You get the Tuesday morning call. That is for Public Square and Tribe community members. That's not on YouTube. Right? That's more of an in-house discussion. We all get on the mic and go around the table. So I'll be doing that tomorrow morning. And then for Tribe community members, we got the Thursday night group coaching call, the Thursday roundtable. So we got that 7 p.m. Eastern on Thursdays, right? And the community call Tuesday morning, tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Eastern. More of an open discussion. And then if you become a Tribe community member, which is the paid version, you get the full playbook, High Raw Vegan Nutrition Guide, the Fasting Guide, my training plans, exclusive content, live stream replays, all that. All right. So hit the link in the bio with that stuff, right? If you need answers, you need help, get in, get involved, get active. Ricardo, my man, what's going on? Good to see you in here. That's right, Monday morning, 9 a.m. You know what time to be here. Oh, that's right. You've heard many good things about alfalfa. Yeah. Alfalfa's good stuff. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. That's another good one to throw in there. You said, I like oats. Is so annoying when people say it's for horses, not humans. Yeah. Does the protocol work because you've already got a significant amount of muscle mass? I don't understand. Does the protocol work because you've already got a significant amount of muscle mass? I don't really understand the question. Does it work because I've already have it? I mean, it'll work whether you have a significant amount of muscle mass or not. Because the approach that I just specified is scalable, right? That's why you base it on grams per kilogram of lean mass, and the eating window and all of that type of stuff. I mean, that's scalable. You can deploy all of the things that I've said in this call, or you can use 2 or 3 of the things. But it definitely works. But it's your approach is going to be individualized based on what your current circumstances are. I'm curious of what your eating and training approach is during the winter. You've spoken about only training 90 minutes or less a week, which sounds like not enough, but you're shredded. The Mensa approach. Yeah, you don't need much training. 90 minutes a week, 90 minutes a week, you don't really need more than that. You can do more than that. You just don't need to. Right. So I mean, like now, I train like typically 3 times a week. Currently right now I'm doing an upper lower split. My workout's like around 20-30 minutes. Yeah, it didn't take a whole lot. 1 set per exercise. You can push that set to mechanical failure. All right. Thanks for sharing and becoming an inspiration. I appreciate that. Appreciate you tuning in. My man Mark is in here. What's going on, Mark? Good to see you in here. Absolutely. We got any more questions? Anything that we got to run? Because look at that. I've been getting better about pacing my time. So I'm not keeping y'all up here all night. Because I got a lot of calls. People trying to get in all their calls before the holiday. So my schedule is getting thickened up here a little bit before the 24th, before Christmas Eve. So y'all want to jump on the schedule? Well, for the last week of November, I did a special where I was doing 50% off diet plans. I did 50% off custom diet plans for community members, but I had 5 slots. I did that last month, and them 5 slots got sold off in like a day and a half. They went real quick. I'm gonna do it again this holiday week. I will be offering this to Public Square members and Tribe community members. All right. I'm gonna do 5 slots. 5. So if you're not in the community, definitely get in the community. If you're a member of the community, you will get the email with the code to get 50% off diet plans. I'll be doing that, and I think I may be doing a discount for the personal coaching plan, the 12-week personal coaching plan. But I'm only doing 1 slot for that. So that will be announced for community members to definitely join the community, because those in the community, y'all get those deals. All right, y'all get those deals. So, but if you want a custom diet plan, I'll be running that special, but it's only going to be for 5 slots. Because I got limited time. So definitely jump in the community. What's the best way to prep that wild rice? So for me personally, I would soak it for around 24 hours or so and then slow boil it over a low heat. You said one exercise actually sounds silly, but clearly it's working. Do you always train that way? I mean, if it sounds silly as opposed to what? Right. But yeah, I mean, it depends. I mean, maybe it sounds silly. I don't know. It's relative to what you find to be normalized in your mind, right? I can see why it would sound silly, but it depends. I haven't always trained this way. Most of my training, I've done fairly high training volume. But there's a reason why I don't do the high training volume anymore. It's because I realize I don't need it and it doesn't work well enough to me sustain the high training volume. Therefore, I don't do it. There's a reason why I switched. I am 39 years old. I've pretty much been lifting consistently since like 18 years old. Right? Completely natural. I don't really identify as a bodybuilder. You know, who wants to compete in bodybuilding and all that type of stuff. I don't really have the desire to get on stage and pose in front of people and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, I like to be healthy. I like to be in athletic good shape. I like to be strong. That's good enough for me. Right? So it depends on what your goals are. It depends on how much time you have. But for the overwhelming majority of people, one set per exercise is going to be enough. Anytime I eat raw greens, I get tremendous gas and constipation. Doctors are telling me to take Metamucil, but it doesn't seem to be working. Any advice? It depends on what raw greens you're eating, right? If you're going to eat raw greens, it should be tender, leafy green vegetables, right? So like your salad greens. Your more cruciferous stuff like the cabbage, for example, or collard greens, things like this. Well, those things you should either steam or boil. My general recommendations for leafy green vegetables is around 8 ounces a day. But it's going to be relative to what the rest of your diet looks like. But it could be, it could be 5 to 8 ounces a day around. Went for a doctor, an annual checkup, and was referred to another cardiologist again because of low heart rate, 50 to 56 heart rate while fasting. Well, I mean, hell, that means I got to go to a doctor. My resting heart rate isn't between 50 and 56. 50 and 56. That's what mine is. So if I was to go to a doctor, they're going to send me to a cardiologist because my resting heart rate is 50 to 56. That's what mine is too. So you and I are in the same boat. So I don't know about all that. Yeah, so 3 to 4 sets as opposed to 1 set. I can get into the math of that, but I would have to do that in a different stream to go into the nuances of that. You've mentioned in the past that training can actually become a trauma. I think that happens to me, but would you recommend 1 set per exercise for a young man, 22 years old, wanting to build lean mass? Yeah, I mean, it could be a trauma. It depends on how well you recover from it. So it depends on exercise tolerance. If you're doing 3 to 4 exercises per set, why are you doing 3 as opposed to 4? Why are you doing 4 as opposed to 5? Why are you doing 5 as opposed to 6? Right? If you do 1 set, why would you need a 2nd set? If you're doing 2 sets, why would you need a 3rd set? What's the difference? Right? So that's the thing you need to consider. Most people will say, well, I do 3 sets, 3 to 4 sets, and I don't feel like 1 set is enough. Well, why wouldn't 1 set be enough? Is it because you haven't damaged your muscle enough? You haven't fatigued your body enough? It depends on how far you took that one set. Most people who do 3 to 4 sets, they only do like 1 or 2 working sets on that exercise. Think about it. You're going to barbell bench press. Your first set is a warm-up set where you're working, let's say if we're talking about like reps in reserve or RPE on a scale of 1 to 10, your first set is probably like a 4, maybe a 5. Second set is like a 6, maybe a second. Third set is like a 7 to 8, and then the fourth set maybe be like an 8 to a 10. Working sets have to be typically between a 7 and a 10 RPE. Right? So your first 2 sets are not really working sets, and a lot of the times your third set is not even really a working set. You're only getting 1 or 2 working sets for that exercise. So if the first set was not enough to stimulate muscle growth because it's not intense enough, it's a wasted set. Right? So people kind of already agree with me. You only really need 1 set per exercise. Because the thing is that let's say if I do 1 set and I take that set to mechanical failure, let's say I get 14 reps out of the first set and I take it to absolute failure. If I decide to do a second set, I may only be able to get maybe 4 reps. If I rest like 2 minutes or something like that, maybe I can get 8. But my second set will not outperform my first set. I will not be able to get more reps on my second set than my first set if I took the first set to mechanical failure. So why am I doing the second set? It's just because I just want to beat my body up more? Okay. Well, how much do you want to beat your body up? If you want to beat your body up more with the second set and that's the goal, why not tack on a third set and beat your body up even more? At what point do you stop beating your body up? Right? It's this slippery slope thinking. And so when I say 1 set, is because it's like, well, you only need 1 set. Sure, you could do 2 or you could do 3. You could. If for whatever reason you just wanted to put more damage and fatigue on your body, sure. And it's fine to do if you can recover from it. If you don't recover well from it and you're not growing, well, you probably shouldn't do it. Because if you're doing 3 sets and not growing, it's probably because you're not recovering enough. So doing a 4th set is not really going to help because you're not recovering when you're doing 3. But if you take the set to complete failure, if you take every set to complete failure and you're doing 3, it's going to feel like hell. You ain't going to want to do a 4th one. If you take the first one to complete failure, that second set is going to look like hell. Trust me. But the only thing that causes muscle to grow is how hard can you push the muscle? That's number 1. And then number 2, how well can you recover? Those are the only things that matter. It doesn't matter how many sets you do. The amount of sets you do is all relative to the amount of effort you're putting in. You can put in a maximal amount of effort spread across 1 set or 3 or 4 or 5 sets. So it depends on exercise tolerance. If your exercise volume is exceeding your tolerance, that's when it becomes a trauma. And then you mess up your ligaments, your tendons, your cartilage. You wreck your nervous system, you destroy your sleep quality, you end up driving down testosterone, you reduce your libido, you can mess around, get erectile dysfunction, all types of stuff because you're just not recovering well. So these are the things that I consider when I say 1 set. If you're 22 years old, you can get away with it, though. You don't need it, but if you're 22 years old, your exercise tolerance is going to be a lot higher at 22 years old. But once you get over like the age of 30, it's a bit different. Once you get over the age of like 25, for some people, it's different. So when you start getting into like college, you're going for your master's degree, bachelor's degree, whatever. You're going for undergrad, you're writing your thesis, PhD, whatever the case is. You're paying taxes, bills, right? You're paying rent, whatever the case is, car insurance, car note, right? You got bills, responsibilities, paperwork, all that. Well, now you got a lot of other competing stresses in your life that you also got to recover from. So you want to be careful. If you run yourself down in your 20s, you will be paying for it in your 30s, 40s, and 50s. So that's another. So these are all things to really consider when you're thinking about training volume. You said the pump seems minimal from just one set. It depends on how many reps you're doing. Yeah, so if you're doing like sets of 3 and 5 reps or 6 reps, you may not really get a pump from that. It's not the amount of reps you're doing per set is not really that high. So you can get a pump, but that vascular response would come too late. But once you get over like 10, 12 reps, or at least 8 reps, that's when you'll get more of a pump. But it also depends on your blood flow. Right? For me, I train with resistance bands and body weight, so the amount of reps I do is going to be a bit higher. I typically train in a rep range of 10 to 20. That's my rep range, particularly that I train at. All right. And I've had guys who I coach and they've been able to build muscle, and I've got guys who are in their 20s and I've got guys who are in their 60s. This approach works straight across the board. And they come back to me and I'm like, I can't believe one set works this well. I'm like, I told you. I've had young guys, I've had guys in their 50s, guys in their 60s. They're like, man, this works incredible. 60 to 90 minutes a week. I get all this free time. I don't got to be killing myself. My joints don't hurt. Damn. I was like, why do you think I decided to no longer do 16 to 20 total sets of volume per week, per muscle group? I used to do 10 sets of training volume per muscle group per week and upwards of 16. That was my sweet spot, in between 10 and 16 sets of volume per muscle group. There's a reason why I don't do that anymore. So, you know. But yeah, be patient with yourself though. Be patient. You got young folks, they make like, man, I want to get it in. Pace yourself. Because you don't want to run yourself ragged in your 20s and then you start having all that joint pain and all these issues in your 30s, 40s, and 50s. All right, pace yourself. You want to be able to lift for the rest of your life. You want to be able to stay in shape for the rest of your life. You don't want to go hard and build an impressive physique in your early and mid 20s, and then you start on a decline in your 30s and 40s because you weren't able to maintain it because you burned yourself out. And a lot of guys do this. They go hard, do all this training volume, and then you get hurt. You tweak your back, you hurt your knee, you can't train, and then so you're skipping training days. You got to take all this time off from the gym, and then your injuries getting in your head, and then you start eating. You want to maintain this high protein diet. You're eating in abundance, but you're not training, so then you're just gaining all this body fat. You start having cheat meals because the injury is getting in your head emotionally. You start emotional eating, packing on tons of body fat. You're losing muscle mass for how long you've been out of the gym. You got an inflammatory diet, and then that just rolls downhill. This is how it happens. And then you get that guy he's like, 40 years old, 45 years old. He's like, I used to be in really good shape, and then I got hurt. So you got to have a broader time horizon. You got to think more long term. That's what's going to keep you in the game. You want to be that guy who's 50, 60 years old and in phenomenal shape. It's easy to be in shape in your 20s. But what kind of shape are you in when you're 50, 60, even 70 years old? right? Let me tell you something. You could be that guy who's 50 years old, 60 years old, and you out in public, and you got young girls in their 20s and 30s looking at you some kind of way. And you be sitting up there looking at them like, man, girl, where your parents at? What you looking at me like that for? Thirsty. What's going on? I'm 30 years older than you, all right? Relax. Make me uncomfortable. I don't want nobody kids looking at me like that. Women. There be some women out here. Alkaline diet. Raw diet. Hitting the gym. Tight. Abs, all this. 60 years old, 50 years old. And the young boys be looking at her. Thirsty. Excuse me, ma'am. I'm old enough to be your mama. Get out of my face. Where your parents at? And you know, that woman who's in shape like that, it's hard for her to meet a man that meets her standard. She be all in shape. And men in her age range, they got heart issues, they got high blood pressure, high cholesterol, they got a history of stroke, erectile dysfunction, low libido, low testosterone, all this. Struggling. She's over here with like, damn, if I want to go out, date, have some fun, whatever, these dudes can't hang. They forcing me to get with these young boys. God damn. Life is weird like that. Life is different, man. Life is different when you're healthy, and you healthy in your older years. Really interesting. So, you know, long-term vision, you got to broaden out. You got a lot of time. Human beings, you can live to be like 100 years old. Why are you rushing when you're in your 20s? There's a lot of life left to live after 30. 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. You don't want to hit your peak at 30 years old and then decline about your 30s until like the grave. You don't want that. Right? So this is what I'm saying. This is how you look at it. You got a long life to live. It's not like 100 years ago where people lived much shorter lives. It ain't like that. So, but yeah, let me get off my soapbox. I don't want to keep y'all on here too long. Definitely like the stream if you like the stream. Hit that like button, right? Like they say in the YouTube space, like, share, and subscribe, right? If you haven't already to the channel, hit the link in the description. Join the community, right? So you get access to exclusive deals, content, live stream replays, community coaching calls. High raw vegan guide, fasting guide, training plans, group coaching calls. And then if you want to book a call with me, you want a one-on-one 60-minute call, get answers to your questions, we do that as well. Everything is in the link in the description of this video. All right. Bless everybody. Remember. I said remember. Remember, wisdom is applied science.